Sophia Chen thought she was making the ultimate sacrifice, marrying billionaire Gabriel Montenegro to save her dying mother's life. But on their wedding night, she discovers a shocking secret that changes everything. Her new husband holds the key to her father's mysterious death, and the arranged marriage was never about love or convenience, it was about keeping her close to a deadly truth. Hello, beautiful souls. Tonight's story will take you on a journey where hearts are tested and destinies collide. Let's dig in. The champagne glass trembled in Sophia's hand as she stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse suite, watching the city lights blur through her tears. The white silk wedding dress that had cost more than her mother's monthly medication now felt like a beautiful prison, its intricate beadwork catching the moonlight like scattered stars. Behind her, Gabriel Montenegro loosened his black tie, the sound of expensive fabric sliding against his collar unnaturally loud in the silence. They had been married for exactly 3 hours, and neither had spoken since leaving the reception. "You don't have to pretend anymore," Gabriel said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of exhaustion. "The cameras are gone. The guests have left. It's just us now." Sophia turned to face him, mascara smudged beneath her dark eyes. In the amber glow of the suite's lighting, she looked fragile and fierce all at once. "What exactly am I pretending about? That this is anything more than a transaction." Gabriel poured himself a scotch from the crystal decanter on the marble bar, his movements precise despite the alcohol he'd consumed at the reception. "Your mother gets her treatment. I get a wife who won't drain my bank account or sell stories to tabloids. Everyone wins." The cruelty in his words made Sophia flinch, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "You think this is easy for me? You think I wanted to marry a stranger?" "I think you wanted to save your mother's life," Gabriel replied, taking a long drink. "And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually the first honest transaction I've had with a woman in years." Sophia moved away from the window, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The suite was magnificent and cold, all sharp angles and expensive materials that reflected light but absorbed no warmth. Like Gabriel himself. "The first honest transaction," she repeated, her voice hollow. "Is that what you call what happened in that church today?" Gabriel studied her face, noting the way her hands shook slightly as she removed her diamond earrings. He had expected gratitude, maybe even relief. Instead, he saw something that looked dangerously close to grief. "What did you expect, Sophia? Love at first sight?" She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "I expected basic human decency. I expected the man who promised to honor and cherish me to at least pretend he didn't find the idea repulsive." "I don't find you repulsive." Gabriel set down his glass and stepped closer, studying her with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations. "You're beautiful, intelligent, and you have principles. That's more than I can say for most of the women in my social circle. But you don't want me." The words hung between them like a challenge. Gabriel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sophia saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Something that looked almost like vulnerability. "What I want isn't relevant," he said finally. "This arrangement protects us both." Sophia reached behind her neck, struggling with the delicate clasp of her necklace. Her mother's hands had been too weak from chemotherapy to help her with it before the ceremony, and the borrowed jewelry felt foreign against her skin. "Let me," Gabriel said, moving behind her. His fingers brushed against her nape as he worked the clasp, and Sophia inhaled sharply at the unexpected gentleness of his touch. "Your mother looked happy today," he said quietly, his breath warm against her ear. "She thinks this is a love story," Sophia whispered. "She thinks you're my knight in shining armor." Gabriel's hands stilled against her neck. In the reflection of the dark window, they looked like a real couple. Like two people who had chosen each other out of love rather than necessity. "Maybe it's better that way." Sophia turned in his arms, suddenly close enough to see the gold flecks in his brown eyes and smell the expensive cologne that clung to his skin. For a moment, the carefully constructed walls between them seemed to crack. "Gabriel, she began, but he stepped back abruptly, the distance between them feeling like a canyon. "Your room is down the hall," he said, his voice formal again. "The door on the left. Rosa had them stock the closet with clothes in your size." The mention of his assistant's name sent a chill through Sophia. She had seen the way Rosa looked at Gabriel during the reception, the barely concealed pain in her eyes when she watched them exchange vows. "Rosa seems to know you very well," Sophia said carefully. Gabriel's expression hardened. "Rosa is my assistant. Nothing more." But Sophia caught the slight hesitation in his voice, the way his hands clenched at his sides. Whatever Rosa was to him, it was definitely more than professional. "I see." Sophia gathered the train of her dress, preparing to leave. "Well, thank you for the clarification. I'd hate to misunderstand the boundaries of our arrangement." She had reached the doorway when Gabriel's voice stopped her. "Sophia." She turned back, hope flickering in her chest despite everything. "The first payment for your mother's treatment will be transferred tomorrow morning," he said, his tone businesslike. "Dr. Richards has already been contacted about the experimental therapy." The hope died as quickly as it had been born. Sophia nodded once, not trusting her voice to remain steady. "Thank you." She was halfway down the hall when she heard him call out again, his voice raw with something she couldn't identify. "Sophia, wait." But when she turned back, his bedroom door was already closing, leaving her alone in the corridor with her borrowed dress and broken dreams. In her room, Sophia sat on the edge of the king-sized bed and opened the drawer of the nightstand, looking for tissues. Instead, her fingers closed around a small velvet box she hadn't noticed before. Inside was a simple gold band, clearly old and well-worn, with an inscription on the inside, "Parami alma gemella, for my soulmate." As she held the ring up to the light, wondering who it had belonged to and why Gabriel had left it in her room, she heard a sound from the adjacent bedroom that made her blood run cold. Gabriel was on the phone, speaking in rapid Spanish, his voice urgent and frightened in a way she had never heard before. "No, you don't understand," he was saying. "She can never find out the truth about her father. If she learns what really happened that night, everything I've worked for will be destroyed." Sophia pressed her ear against the shared wall, her heart hammering so loudly she was afraid Gabriel might hear it through the thin barrier. The old ring felt cold and heavy in her palm as she strained to catch every word of his conversation. "Carlos, listen to me carefully," Gabriel continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Eduardo Chen was my responsibility that night. His blood is on my hands, not yours. Eduardo Chen." Her father's name spoken like a curse in the darkness made Sophia's knees buckle. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the plush carpet, the wedding dress pooling around her like spilled milk. Her father had died in a car accident 2 years ago. A tragic, senseless collision on a rain-slicked highway. That's what the police had told them. That's what she had grieved. That's what had broken her mother's spirit and drained their savings for the funeral. But Gabriel's words painted a different picture, one stained with guilt and deception. "I know what we agreed," Gabriel said, his voice growing more agitated. "But marrying his daughter was never part of the plan. This changes everything." Sophia's hands shook as she clutched the ring tighter, its metal edge biting into her palm. The inscription blurred through her tears. "Parami alma gemella." Her father had always called her mother his soulmate. Had this ring been meant for Maria? The conversation on the other side of the wall fell silent, and Sophia held her breath, pressing herself against the door. Had Gabriel heard something? Was he coming to check on her? Instead, she heard the sound of glass shattering, followed by a string of curses in Spanish that would have made her father blush. Gabriel was destroying something in his room, and the violence in his movements made her stomach clench with fear. She had married a stranger. A stranger who knew secrets about her father's death that could destroy her family. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, Los Angeles hidden beneath a blanket of marine layer that matched Sophia's mood. She had spent the night sitting in the window seat, still wearing her wedding dress, watching the sun struggle to break through the clouds. Gabriel found her there when he brought coffee on a silver tray, his business mask firmly back in place. He had changed into a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, every hair perfectly styled, but she could see the exhaustion around his eyes and the small bandage on his right hand where he must have cut himself on the broken glass. "You should have changed out of that dress," he said, setting the tray on the small table beside her. "It's going to wrinkle." "I don't care about the dress." Sophia's voice was hoarse from crying, and she made no effort to hide the evidence of her sleepless night. "We need to talk." Gabriel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "About what?" "About my father." The coffee cup slipped from Gabriel's fingers, hot liquid splashing across the marble floor. For a moment, his carefully constructed composure cracked, and Sophia saw a raw terror flash across his features. "What about your father? You tell me." Sophia stood, the ring still clutched in her fist. "You seem to know more about Eduardo Chen than his own daughter does." Gabriel's eyes fixed on her closed hand with laser focus. "Where did you get that ring?" "From the nightstand drawer." "The question is, how did you get it? And why were you talking about my father's blood being on your hands?" The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Gabriel moved to the window, staring out at the gray cityscape as if it held the answers he was looking for. "Your father was a good man," he said finally. "Better than he had any right to be, considering the choices he made." "What choices?" Gabriel turned back to face her, and Sophia was struck by how much older he looked in the harsh morning light. The confident businessman was gone, replaced by someone haunted by ghosts she couldn't see. "Eduardo worked for my father's import business, but not in the way you think. He helped us move money. Clean money that needed to look dirty, dirty money that needed to look clean. He was our accountant, our bookkeeper, our conscience." Sophia felt the room tilt around her. "You're saying my father was a criminal?" "I'm saying your father was trying to get out." Gabriel's voice was barely above a whisper. He had found evidence of things that went beyond creative accounting. Things that could have destroyed not just my father's business, but dozens of families who depended on it for their livelihood. "What kind of things?" Gabriel shook his head. "The kind that get people killed if they talk about them to the wrong person." The implications hit Sophia like a physical blow. The car accident wasn't an accident. No. The word fell between them like a stone. It wasn't. Sophia sank back into the window seat, her legs no longer able to support her. Everything she thought she knew about her father, about her family, about the man she had married, was crumbling around her. "Did you kill him?" she asked, her voice so quiet Gabriel had to lean forward to hear her. "No." His answer was immediate and fierce. "But I was supposed to." The confession hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. Sophia stared at Gabriel, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not a successful businessman who had married her out of convenience, but a man drowning in guilt and secrets. "My father sent me to meet with Eduardo that night," Gabriel continued, his voice mechanical, as if reciting facts from a police report. "Eduardo had called earlier, said he had evidence that could put us all in prison. My father was convinced he was going to the FBI. But he wasn't. He was going to disappear. Take you and your mother and start over somewhere safe. He had already emptied his bank accounts, sold everything he could without raising suspicion. The meeting was supposed to be his way of buying time, giving you a head start." Sophia opened her palm and stared down at the ring, imagining her father's hands as he slipped it into his pocket that last night, planning a future he would never see. "What happened?" Gabriel's composure finally shattered completely. He dropped into the chair across from her, burying his face in his hands. "I was supposed to kill him and make it look like an accident. Instead, I tried to warn him. Told him to run, to get out of the city immediately. But Eduardo was stubborn. He said he wouldn't leave without confronting my father first, wouldn't abandon the families who would be hurt if the business collapsed. So you killed him for being honorable? No. Gabriel's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. I tried to stop him from going to that meeting. We argued. He got in his car angry, distracted. When he skidded off the highway in the rain, part of me wondered if he had done it on purpose. If he chose to die rather than live with the knowledge of what my family really was. Sophia felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. And you've been living with that guilt ever since. I've been living with the knowledge that a good man is dead because I was too much of a coward to stand up to my father. Gabriel's voice broke on the last word. And now I've married his daughter, brought her into the same world that killed him. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. The arrangement wasn't your father's idea. It was yours. Gabriel nodded miserably. I thought if I could take care of you and your mother, if I could give you the security your father wanted to provide, maybe I could find some peace. Maybe I could honor his memory. Or maybe you could assuage your guilt by playing the hero. The accusation hit its mark. Gabriel flinched as if she had slapped him. Maybe, he admitted. But that doesn't change the fact that your mother is getting the treatment she needs. That you'll never have to worry about money again. Sophia stood abruptly, pacing to the other side of the room. The morning light was finally breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the marble floor. At what cost, Gabriel? What happens when your father realizes you've married Eduardo Chen's daughter? What happens when he figures out that this wasn't about finding you a suitable wife? Gabriel's silence was answer enough. Carlos Montenegro was a dangerous man who eliminated threats to his business. If he discovered that his son had married the daughter of the man who had nearly destroyed their empire, Sophia would become a liability that needed to be managed. He already knows, Gabriel said quietly. He's known since the day I proposed the arrangement. Sophia's blood turned to ice. What? My father isn't a sentimental man, but he's not stupid. He knew exactly who you were the moment I mentioned your name. Gabriel met her eyes, and she saw her own fear reflected there. The question is what he plans to do about it. As if summoned by their conversation, Sophia heard the distinctive sound of a key turning in the lock of the penthouse's front door. Heavy footsteps crossed the marble foyer, moving with the confidence of someone who owned everything he touched. Gabriel? Carlos Montenegro's voice echoed through the suite, warm and paternal and utterly terrifying. I've come to congratulate the happy couple. Carlos Montenegro filled the doorway like a shadow made flesh, his silver hair gleaming and his smile sharp enough to cut glass. At 65, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no and never expected to be. His expensive suit couldn't quite hide the predator underneath. Sophia, Mija, he said, spreading his arms wide as if greeting a beloved daughter. How beautiful you look, even after such a long night. Sophia instinctively stepped behind Gabriel, her hand finding his arm. Through the fabric of his shirt, she could feel the tension coiled in his muscles like a spring ready to snap. Hello, Mr. Montenegro, she managed, her voice barely steady. Please, we are family now. Call me Carlos. His dark eyes moved between Gabriel and Sophia, taking in their positioning, her rumpled wedding dress, the broken glass that Gabriel hadn't yet cleaned up. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. What do you want, father? Gabriel's voice was carefully controlled, but Sophia heard the underlying current of fear. Carlos moved into the room as if he owned it, which, Sophia realized with a chill, he probably did. He picked up one of the coffee cups Gabriel had brought, inhaling its aroma with obvious pleasure. I wanted to discuss your honeymoon plans, he said casually. I've arranged for you to use the house in Cabo. Beautiful ocean views, complete privacy. Perfect for a new couple getting to know each other. We haven't discussed a honeymoon, Gabriel replied. Of course not. You've both been so busy with other concerns. Carlos's gaze lingered on Sophia with predatory interest. How is your mother feeling, Sophia? I understand she began her new treatment yesterday. The casual mention of her mother's medical situation sent ice through Sophia's veins. Carlos Montenegro was letting her know that he knew everything about her family's circumstances, that he could reach Maria anytime he chose. She's responding well, thank you for asking. Excellent. Dr. Richards is the best in his field. Very expensive, but worth every penny when it comes to family. Carlos set down the coffee cup with deliberate precision. Speaking of family, I brought you both a wedding gift. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it on the table between them like a gauntlet. What is it? Gabriel asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected. Open it. Gabriel's hands shook almost imperceptibly as he picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Inside were photographs, grainy and dark but clear enough to make him go pale. Sophia caught a glimpse of what looked like two men in a parking garage before Gabriel quickly closed the envelope. Where did you get these? I've had them for 2 years, Carlos said, his voice still conversational. Since the night Eduardo Chen died. Security cameras are everywhere these days, Gabriel. Even in places people think are private. Sophia felt the ground shift beneath her feet. What's in those photographs? Carlos answered before Gabriel could speak. Images of my son meeting with your father the night he died. Images of Gabriel handing Eduardo an envelope full of cash. Images that, without proper context, might suggest that Gabriel hired your father to do something illegal rather than trying to warn him. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Carlos had evidence that could be interpreted multiple ways, depending on the narrative he chose to construct. He could make Gabriel look like a hero or a villain with the same set of photographs. What do you want? Sophia asked, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Carlos smiled approvingly. Direct. I like that. Your father was the same way. Eduardo never wasted time on pleasantries when business needed to be discussed. Don't talk about her father, Gabriel said sharply. Why not? Eduardo was an old friend. We worked together for years before that unfortunate misunderstanding at the end. Carlos moved to the window, gazing out at the city like a king surveying his domain. He was a good man who made one very bad decision. He forgot that loyalty is the most valuable currency in our business. He found out you were trafficking more than money, Sophia said, the pieces clicking into place. He discovered something that made him willing to risk everything to stop you. Carlos turned back to face her, his expression shifting from paternal warmth to something much colder. Your father discovered that sometimes progress requires difficult choices. He chose to see those choices as betrayals rather than necessities. What kind of necessities? The kind that keep families like yours fed and housed and healthy, Carlos replied smoothly. The kind that pay for experimental cancer treatments and private schools and wedding dresses that cost more than most people make in a year. The implication was clear. Everything Sophia had, everything her mother needed to survive, was built on the foundation of whatever illegal activities Carlos Montenegro ran. Her father had died trying to expose it, and now she was trapped within it. I won't be part of this, she said, lifting her chin defiantly. You already are, Mija. From the moment you said, I do, you became a Montenegro. That name comes with privileges and responsibilities. Gabriel stepped between them, his protective instincts finally overriding his fear of his father. Leave her out of this. Whatever you want, take it out on me. Carlos laughed, the sound genuinely amused. Gabriel, you still don't understand. I don't want to punish anyone. I want to welcome Sophia into the family properly. He pulled out a second envelope, this one smaller and sealed with wax. Inside this envelope is information about your father's final project, Sophia. The evidence he compiled before his death. Names, dates, financial records, everything he planned to turn over to the authorities. Sophia's heart stopped. He gave it to you. He gave it to Gabriel, actually. That's what's in those photographs. Your husband receiving your father's life insurance policy, so to speak. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. She turned to look at Gabriel, seeing the guilt written across his features. You've had evidence against your father this entire time, she whispered. Sophia, let me explain. 2 years, she continued, her voice growing stronger with anger. You've had the evidence that could have brought him to justice, and instead you've been protecting him. It's not that simple, Gabriel said desperately. If that evidence comes to light, it doesn't just destroy my father. It destroys dozens of innocent families whose livelihoods depend on his businesses. It destroys your mother's medical care, your future financial security. So you decided to play God with other people's lives. Carlos clapped his hands slowly, the sound echoing in the tense silence. Bravo, Sophia. You understand the situation perfectly. Gabriel has been protecting everyone by protecting me. Including you. I don't want your protection, Sophia said fiercely. I want justice for my father. Justice is expensive, Mija. And it often hurts the innocent more than the guilty. Carlos picked up the sealed envelope and held it out to her. But if that's what you truly want, the choice is yours. Take this envelope and you'll have everything you need to destroy the Montenegro Empire. Turn it over to the FBI and watch my world burn. Sophia reached for the envelope, but Carlos didn't release it. Of course, if you make that choice, your mother's treatment stops immediately. The money for her medication, her doctors, her care, all of it disappears. Gabriel's assets will be frozen during the investigation. You'll be left with nothing but the satisfaction of having done the right thing. The envelope felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in her hands. Inside was the power to avenge her father and destroy the criminal organization that had killed him. Outside was the reality that doing so would also kill her mother and destroy any chance she had of a life with Gabriel. What's the alternative? She asked quietly. You become my daughter in truth as well as in name, Carlos said. You learn the family business. You use your artistic eye to help us expand into more legitimate enterprises. You give Gabriel the children he needs to carry on the Montenegro name. And you live a life of comfort and security that your father always wanted for you. Built on blood money. Built on pragmatism. The world isn't divided into good people and evil people, Sophia. It's divided into people who understand that survival requires compromise and people who die clinging to useless principles. Gabriel was watching her with desperate eyes, and she realized that her decision would determine not just her own fate, but his as well. If she chose justice, she would be condemning the man she was beginning to care for to a life of prison or worse. If she chose survival, she would be betraying everything her father had died trying to protect. I need time to think, she said. Carlos checked his expensive watch. You have until tonight. I'm hosting a dinner party for some business associates. Important people who need to meet Gabriel's new wife and assess whether she's an asset or a liability to the family. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Sophia. Your father made his choice 2 years ago, and it cost him everything. But he knew the consequences when he made it. Don't make the same mistake of thinking that nobility is more important than survival. After Carlos left, the penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Sophia sat on the couch holding the envelope, while Gabriel stared out at the city as if memorizing it before saying goodbye. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it. For your father, for lying to you, for dragging you into this. Are you sorry for marrying me? Gabriel turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. No. Despite everything, despite the circumstances, I'm not sorry for that. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I'm married to someone who sees me clearly and might choose to stay anyway. Sophia looked down at the envelope in her hands, then at the ring her father had meant for her mother. 2 symbols of love and sacrifice, of choices made and prices paid. Gabriel, she said quietly, what if there was a third option? Before he could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Sophia's blood went cold. Maria never called unless it was an emergency. Sophia, Mija, her mother's voice was weak and frightened. There are men here at the hospital. They say they work for your husband's family. They say they need to speak with me about your father. The hospital's sterile corridors echoed with the sound of Sophia's heels as she ran toward her mother's room, Gabriel close behind her. The manila envelope was still clutched in her hand, its contents feeling heavier with each step. They found Maria sitting in her hospital bed, pale and shaking, while two men in expensive suits flanked her chair like well-dressed vultures. Rosa Delgado stood near the window, her expression unreadable as she watched Sophia's frantic entrance. "Mama!" Sophia rushed to her mother's side, pushing past the men to take Maria's trembling hands. "Sophia, gracias a Dios," Maria whispered, her voice hoarse from the chemotherapy. "These men, they have been asking me questions about your father. About things I don't understand." Gabriel stepped forward, his voice sharp with authority. "What are you doing here?" "My father said nothing about involving Maria." The taller of the two men, a lean figure with cold gray eyes, smiled without warmth. "Plans change, Mr. Montenegro. Your father felt it was important to confirm some details about Eduardo Chen's final days." "My mother knows nothing about my father's business," Sophia said fiercely. "Perhaps not," the man replied. "But she knows about the safety deposit box." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at her mother, seeing confusion and fear warring in Maria's eyes. "What safety deposit box?" Maria asked weakly. "The one your husband opened 3 weeks before his death," Rosa said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. "The one he visited twice in the days before he died, including the morning of his accident." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Rosa, what are you doing here?" "Your father asked me to handle the delicate aspects of this conversation," Rosa replied smoothly. "He thought a woman's touch might be more appropriate." But Sophia caught the flash of something else in Rosa's eyes. Not loyalty to Carlos Montenegro. Something more personal. Something that looked like jealousy and pain twisted together into a weapon. "I don't know anything about a safety deposit box," Maria said, looking between them in growing panic. "Then perhaps you know about this?" Rosa pulled out a photograph and placed it on the hospital bed's rolling table. It showed Eduardo Chen standing outside a bank, a small key visible in his hand. Maria's reaction was immediate and devastating. Her face crumpled as recognition hit her, and she began to cry with the broken sobs of someone whose last illusions were being stripped away. "He told me it was for insurance papers," she whispered. "For our future. He said if anything happened to him, I should go to the bank and get the envelope he left for Sophia." The room fell silent except for Maria's quiet weeping. Sophia felt the walls closing in around her as she realized that her father had left one final message, one last piece of evidence that could change everything. "Where is the key, Mama?" she asked gently. Maria looked up at her daughter with eyes full of guilt and sorrow. "I threw it away. After the funeral, when the lawyers said there was no life insurance, no money, nothing left. I was so angry at him for leaving us with nothing. I threw away everything that reminded me of his broken promises." "When did you throw it away?" Gabriel asked, his voice tight with tension. "Last month. When we started running out of money for my treatments. I cleaned out all his belongings, donated everything to charity." Maria's voice broke completely. "I threw away the key because I thought it was just another one of his empty gestures." Rosa and the two men exchanged glances that Sophia didn't like. There was something too satisfied in their expressions, something that suggested they had gotten exactly the information they came for. "Where did you donate his belongings?" the gray-eyed man asked. "St. Vincent's thrift store on Sunset Boulevard," Maria replied, wiping her eyes. "Why? What's so important about that key?" But the men were already moving toward the door, their business apparently concluded. Rosa lingered for a moment, her gaze fixed on Gabriel with an intensity that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Your father is expecting you both at dinner tonight," Rosa said. "Don't disappoint him." After they left, Sophia sank into the chair beside her mother's bed, her mind racing. Everything was connected: her father's death, the safety deposit box, Gabriel's guilt, and now the key that held the real truth about Eduardo Chen's final days. "Sophia," Maria said weakly, "I'm frightened." "What have you gotten yourself into?" Before Sophia could answer, Gabriel's phone buzzed with a text message. His face went pale as he read it, and Sophia saw his hands begin to shake. "What is it?" she asked. Gabriel showed her the screen. The message was from an unknown number, but the content was terrifyingly clear: "We have the key. Dinner tonight at 8 p.m. Come alone, or your mother dies." "This is wrong," Sophia said, standing abruptly. "Your father said I had until tonight to make my decision." "He said." "My father lied," Gabriel interrupted, his voice hollow. "He never intended to give you a real choice. This was all a setup to force you into compliance. Then we go to the police. We turn over the evidence we have and your mother dies while we're explaining the situation to federal agents who won't understand the urgency." Gabriel pulled her aside, speaking in low, urgent tones. "My father doesn't make empty threats, Sophia. If we don't show up tonight, if we don't play by his rules, he'll have Maria killed and make it look like a complication from her treatment." Sophia looked at her mother, fragile and trusting in her hospital bed, and felt the trap closing around her completely. Carlos Montenegro had maneuvered them into a position where resistance meant death and compliance meant surrendering any hope of justice. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There is," Gabriel said quietly. "But you're not going to like it." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number, speaking rapidly in Spanish when someone answered. Sophia caught enough to understand that he was calling in a debt, asking for help that would come at a steep price. "What did you just do?" she asked when he hung up. "I called someone who has as much reason to hate my father as you do," Gabriel replied. "Someone who's been waiting for the right opportunity to bring him down." "Who?" "Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. She's been investigating my father's organization for 3 years. She's also Eduardo Chen's goddaughter." The revelation hit Sophia like a physical blow. "My father's goddaughter is an FBI agent?" "Your father reached out to her the week before he died," Gabriel continued. "He told her he had evidence that could bring down my father's entire operation, but he needed time to get you and your mother to safety first. And she's been investigating ever since. She's been waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right leverage, the right opportunity to strike without putting innocent people at risk." Gabriel's expression was grim. "Tonight's dinner party isn't just a family gathering. It's a meeting of all my father's key associates. Everyone who matters in the organization will be in one place." Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. "You're talking about setting up a trap." "I'm talking about finishing what your father started." Gabriel took her hands in his, and she could feel the tremor in his fingers. "But it means I'll have to betray my father publicly. It means I'll probably go to prison along with him. And it means you'll be in danger from the moment we walk into that room." "What about my mother?" "Agent Martinez has already arranged for protective custody. Maria will be moved to a secure location within the hour, supposedly for a specialist consultation. She'll be safe." Sophia looked at the envelope still clutched in her hand, then at her mother sleeping fitfully in the hospital bed. 2 years of grief and questions and financial desperation had led to this moment, this choice between justice and survival. "There's something else," Gabriel said quietly. "Something I haven't told you about Rosa." "What about her?" Gabriel's jaw tightened with what looked like shame. "She's not just my assistant. She's been feeding information to my father about my activities for months. Every conversation we've had, every plan I've made, every moment of doubt I've expressed about the family business. Rosa has been reporting it all back to him. The betrayal cut deeper than Sophia had expected. She had sensed Rosa's feelings for Gabriel, but she hadn't realized the extent of the other woman's willingness to manipulate and deceive. How long have you known? I suspected for weeks, but I confirmed it this morning when I saw her with those men at the hospital. She's the one who told my father about the safety deposit box. She's the one who suggested using your mother as leverage. Sophia thought about Rosa's cold eyes, her obvious pain at watching Gabriel marry another woman, her intimate knowledge of his business and personal life. Love twisted into betrayal was one of the most dangerous forces in the world. She's going to be at the dinner tonight, Sophia realized. Yes. And she's going to be expecting us to walk into my father's trap exactly as he's planned it. Gabriel's expression hardened with determination. But Agent Martinez has a different plan. One that turns Rosa's betrayal into our advantage. Before Sophia could ask what he meant, her phone buzzed with a text message. This one was from her mother's number, but the words made her blood run cold. Your mother is comfortable and safe. For now. Remember, dinner at 8 p.m. Don't disappoint the family. They have her, Sophia whispered. Gabriel checked his own phone and nodded grimly. Agent Martinez's team was 30 seconds too late. My father moved faster than we anticipated. The trap was complete. Carlos Montenegro had every piece he needed to force their compliance, Maria as a hostage, Rosa as his spy inside Gabriel's confidence, and the safety deposit box key as the final evidence of Eduardo Chen's betrayal. What do we do now? Sophia asked. Gabriel looked at her with eyes full of love and regret and desperate determination. We walk into that dinner party, and we improvise. We trust each other, we trust Agent Martinez, and we hope that justice is worth the price we're about to pay. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Gabriel caught Sophia's hand and pressed something small and cold into her palm. It was a wire, nearly invisible and designed to transmit everything said within a 10-foot radius. Whatever happens tonight, he said quietly, remember that I love you. Not because of the arrangement, not because of guilt over your father, but because you're the first person who's ever made me want to be better than what my family made me. Sophia looked down at the wire, then at the man who had become her husband under the strangest and most dangerous circumstances imaginable. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of her own fear and determination. I love you too, she whispered, surprised to realize it was true. And we're going to survive this. Both of us. But as they walked out of the hospital and into the Los Angeles twilight, neither of them saw Rosa Delgado watching from a black sedan across the street, her phone already dialing Carlos Montenegro's number to report that the final pieces of his game were moving exactly as he had planned. The Montenegro estate sprawled across the hillside like a fortress of glass and steel, its windows blazing with warm light against the darkening sky. Sophia felt the wire taped beneath her ribs as Gabriel helped her from the car, the small device both a lifeline and a death sentence depending on how the next few hours unfolded. Remember, Gabriel murmured as they approached the massive front doors, whatever my father says, whatever he reveals, act surprised. Agent Martinez needs authentic reactions to make the recordings admissible in court. Sophia nodded, though her throat felt too tight to speak. Somewhere in this gleaming monument to wealth and power, her mother was being held captive. Somewhere in the shadows, federal agents were waiting for the signal to move. And somewhere in the elegant dining room ahead, Rosa Delgado was prepared to destroy them both. Carlos Montenegro greeted them in the marble foyer like a benevolent patriarch, his arms spread wide and his smile warm enough to melt ice. He wore an immaculate white dinner jacket that made him look like a character from an old Hollywood film, dangerous and charming in equal measure. Sophia, Mija, you look radiant, he said, kissing her cheeks with paternal affection. Marriage agrees with you. Thank you, she managed, forcing herself to return his smile. Where is my mother? I'd like to see her before dinner. Maria is resting comfortably upstairs, Carlos replied smoothly. The excitement of the day exhausted her, I'm afraid. But she'll join us for dessert if she feels strong enough. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease, and Sophia realized that this man could probably convince people that the sky was green if it served his purposes. No wonder her father had struggled to expose him. Carlos Montenegro was a master manipulator who made deception look like kindness. They were led into a dining room that belonged in a palace, its crystal chandelier casting rainbow fragments across walls lined with priceless art. 20 guests were already seated around the massive mahogany table, men and women who looked like successful professionals but whose eyes held the cold calculation of predators. Ladies and gentlemen, Carlos announced, I present my new daughter-in-law, Sophia Montenegro. The applause was polite and hollow, and Sophia felt like a piece of meat being displayed for a pack of wolves. She took her seat beside Gabriel, noting that Rosa was positioned directly across from them, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. Sophia, Rosa said sweetly, you must tell us about your artistic pursuits. I understand you're quite talented with a paintbrush. I teach art to children, Sophia replied carefully. It's very rewarding work. How noble, purred an older woman with predatory eyes. Though I imagine you'll have less time for such hobbies now that you're part of the family business. Gabriel's hand tightened on his wine glass. Sophia will pursue whatever interests fulfill her. Of course, Carlos interjected smoothly. Family comes first, but we all have our individual passions. Speaking of which, I have a little surprise for tonight's dinner. He signaled to a servant, who wheeled in a small television on an antique cart. Carlos picked up a remote and turned on the screen, revealing security footage from what looked like a parking garage. Sophia's heart stopped. It was the same footage from the photographs, but now she could see it in motion. Her father getting out of his car, looking nervous and determined. Gabriel approaching with an envelope in his hand. The two men talking intensely, Eduardo gesturing angrily while Gabriel tried to calm him. This is from 2 years ago, Carlos announced to the room. The night Eduardo Chen died. The footage continued, showing her father getting back into his car and driving away while Gabriel stood alone in the parking garage. But then the camera angle changed, revealing something that made Sophia's blood freeze. Rosa Delgado, emerging from behind a pillar where she had been hiding, watching the entire exchange. Rosa was there, Sophia whispered, unable to hide her shock. Oh yes, Carlos said with obvious pleasure. Rosa has been invaluable to our family's security for many years. She made sure that Eduardo Chen never reached his destination that night. The implication hit the room like a bomb. Rosa hadn't just been spying on Gabriel. She had been the one to cause Eduardo's fatal accident, to ensure that he died before he could expose the Montenegro operation. Gabriel went white with horror and rage. You killed her father, he said to Rosa, his voice shaking. You murdered an innocent man. Rosa's mask of professional composure finally slipped, revealing the obsessive love and jealous hatred underneath. Eduardo Chen was going to destroy you, she said fiercely. He was going to send you to prison, ruin your life, take away everything you'd worked for. I couldn't let that happen. So you decided to play executioner? I decided to protect the man I love. Rosa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Everything I've done has been for you, Gabriel. Including marrying you to his daughter so you could keep her close and controllable. The final piece of Carlos Montenegro's game became clear with horrible precision. The arranged marriage hadn't been about tradition or Gabriel's happiness. It had been about bringing Eduardo Chen's daughter into the family where she could be monitored, manipulated, and ultimately silenced if necessary. You used me, Gabriel said to his father, his voice hollow with betrayal. I protected you, Carlos corrected. Just as Rosa protected you. Just as this entire organization exists to protect our family and our way of life. But Sophia was no longer listening to Carlos's justifications. Her attention was fixed on Rosa, seeing the other woman clearly for the first time. Not a loyal assistant or a woman scorned, but a killer who had murdered her father out of twisted love for a man who would never return her feelings. "You followed him from the meeting," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. "You ran him off the road." "It was supposed to look like an accident," Rosa replied, her tone matter-of-fact. "And it did. No one suspected anything until Gabriel started asking questions he shouldn't have been asking. Questions like why an experienced driver would skid off a straight stretch of highway on a night when the rain had already stopped." Rosa's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Questions that would have gotten him killed if I hadn't been there to redirect the investigation." The confession was everything Agent Martinez needed, transmitted clearly through the wire hidden beneath Sophia's dress. But as Sophia reached for her water glass, she noticed something that made her heart sink. Carlos was watching her with knowing eyes, his expression amused rather than concerned. He knew about the wire. He had known all along. "Sophia," he said gently, "would you mind removing that recording device? It's rather rude to spy on family dinner." The room went silent except for the soft tick of the antique clock in the corner. 20 pairs of eyes focused on Sophia with predatory intensity, and she realized that Agent Martinez's plan had been compromised from the beginning. "How?" she asked. "Rosa, of course," Carlos replied. "She's been monitoring Gabriel's communications all evening. We know about Agent Martinez, we know about the FBI surveillance, and we know about your rather touching plan to bring justice to Eduardo Chen's memory." Gabriel pushed back from the table, his hand moving towards something concealed in his jacket. But before he could reach it, 2 of Carlos's men appeared behind his chair, their own weapons drawn and ready. "Please, Gabriel," Carlos said sadly. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." But Sophia was no longer the frightened young woman who had married a stranger to save her mother's life. The past 24 hours had burned away her innocence and replaced it with something harder and more dangerous. "You want to know the truth about that safety deposit box," she said, standing slowly and facing Carlos across the gleaming table. "I already know the truth. Your father compiled evidence against our organization. Evidence that died with him." "No," Sophia said with a smile that could have cut glass. "The evidence in that safety deposit box wasn't about your organization. It was about Eduardo Chen's real job for the past 5 years." The room went very still. Carlos's confident expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. "My father wasn't your accountant," Sophia continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He was an undercover federal agent. Agent Eduardo Chen, assigned to infiltrate and document your criminal enterprise. Everything he did, every transaction he handled, every meeting he attended was recorded and transmitted to his handlers at the FBI." Rosa made a sound like a wounded animal. "That's impossible. The safety deposit box doesn't contain evidence against the Montenegro organization," Sophia said, pulling the manila envelope from her purse. "It contains evidence that my father's death was murder, not an accident. Including audio recordings of Rosa confessing to his killing, made during his final phone call to Agent Martinez before he died." She opened the envelope and scattered its contents across the white tablecloth. Photographs, documents, and a small digital recorder that had been playing silently throughout the entire dinner conversation. "He never stopped recording," Sophia said to Rosa, whose face had gone ashen. "Even when you forced his car off the road, even as he was dying, my father was still doing his job. He was still gathering evidence." The sound of breaking glass came from somewhere in the house as federal agents breached the windows and doors simultaneously. Carlos Montenegro's empire was falling around him in real time, brought down not by his son's betrayal or his enemy's investigation, but by a dead man's dedication to justice. In the chaos that followed, as agents swarmed the dining room and handcuffs clicked onto wrists, Sophia found herself in Gabriel's arms. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead where one of his father's men had struck him, but his eyes were clear and focused entirely on her. "Is it over?" he asked. "It's over," she confirmed, watching as Rosa was led away in restraints, her obsessive love finally transformed into the prison sentence she deserved. 6 months later, Sophia stood in the art studio she had always dreamed of owning, teaching painting techniques to a group of children whose laughter filled the sun-drenched space with joy. Her mother sat in the corner, healthy and radiant, sketching the scene with the artistic talent she had passed down to her daughter. Gabriel found them there, as he did most afternoons when his testimony in the ongoing trial was finished for the day. The Montenegro fortune had been largely seized by the government, but enough remained unfrozen to ensure that Maria's medical care continued and that Sophia could pursue the dreams her father had died protecting. "How was court today?" Sophia asked, stepping into his embrace and breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. "Rosa was sentenced to life without parole," Gabriel replied quietly. "My father got 25 years. And you?" "Immunity in exchange for cooperation. Agent Martinez says I'll probably have to testify for another few months, but after that." He trailed off, studying her face. "After that, we can start over. If you want to." Sophia looked at the ring on her finger, no longer a symbol of an arranged marriage but a choice freely made and daily reaffirmed. They had been through hell together, had faced betrayal and murder and the collapse of everything Gabriel had thought he knew about his family. But they had also found something neither had expected in their desperate arrangement. "I love you," she said simply. "Not because of circumstances or convenience or guilt. I love you because you chose justice over safety, truth over comfort. Because you're the man my father would have been proud to call his son-in-law." Gabriel kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promises for a future built on honesty rather than deception. In the background, Sophia Chen smiled as she continued sketching, capturing the moment when her daughter finally found the happiness that Eduardo had wanted for her all along. The end. Like if you want more arranged marriage stories with dark twists. Subscribe for more emotional stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Share with anyone who loves stories about love triumphing over betrayal.